absence makes the heart grow fonder. We've missed it because every 2 years we get it. In the build, it seems like forever. We made it. It's Ryder Cup week. And what is on the line? In the grand scheme of things, who knows? But we know in the moment, the intensity of this is why we love it so much, because it's so decidedly different from the rest of what we do covering elite golf. And so when this competition started and Samuel Ryder said, let's put together a goodwill match between these continents, and let's put my little instructor, this little figurine, Abe Mitchell, on the top of this little modest trophy, we had no idea what it was going to become. Well, we're going to talk about that with one of the great historians in the game, Jaime Diaz. How did we get where we currently are? How did this event become what it is? How did it grow from, this very nice, congenial, very fraternal exhibition? Think about this, that in 1969, Jack Nicklaus played in his first Ryder Cup. He was a 7-time major champion. He wasn't eligible until then. Can you imagine if anybody won, forget 7, won, and you said, you know what, he's not eligible yet. It's come a long, long way. So here we sit, this cauldron that is boiling over between Europe and the United States. Our Ryder Cup historical perspective and 2025 preview is next.
When your hands are consistent, your game can go anywhere. Align Max, our newest raised ridge technology, designed to keep you and your game locked in on every shot. Only from Golf Pride. Respect the grip.
And with that, welcome in to this Ryder Cup preview and historical perspective as we get you ready. Not that you're not already ready for this thing to get going in 2025 at Bethpage. And as I mentioned, always great to be alongside a terrific historian, a contributor to this game in so many ways, contributing now, Golf Digest, Golf Channel, and also here at 5 Clubs, Jaime Diaz. All right, here we go with the first big open-ended question. How did we get here? Like, how did this thing get to where it is? I mean, you got to have some dumb luck. You got to have some people who walk onto the stage that you go, okay, that guy, I can watch that guy.
Yeah.
And they've gotten a lot of that. How do you think we've gotten here, sitting here in 2025, from the modest beginnings of this competition?
Yeah, the modest beginnings were good. It was a goodwill match.
Yeah.
And it was great. It was a wonderful way of exchanging, respect for the cultures of the different continents and the great players in the world sort of having a great week together. But it was pretty much overmatched in favor of the Americans. And then in '79, when we started talking about, okay, we're expanding Great Britain and Ireland to include Europe, a guy named Seve Ballesteros is in the game. And he was a catalyst to a large extent in terms of, opening up the possibilities of being as good as the Americans. And you had a wonderful captain in Tony Jacklin, who had played on America, had won a couple of majors, and really understood what it took and brought a higher standard and a higher expectation to their players. And those two guys really kind of changed the culture in Europe about the Ryder Cup. And they almost won in '83 in Palm Beach. That was close.
Yeah.
It was looked at as a fluke, but then '85 they kind of validated and won at the Belfry. Lee Trevino was the captain, Jacklin was the captain, and they got outplayed. There was a moment in that Ryder Cup, I probably should, talk about that, in which it was.
You think this was one of those moments lost by many, but in ways far more powerful than just.
It turned out to have
moment.
a tremendous ripple effect. Nobody expected it, but and the players at the time acknowledged that was a moment, and we suddenly felt hope. So I shouldn't keep you in suspense. It was basically a match. I think it was a foursomes match with Curtis Strange and no, it was a 4-ball match. Curtis Strange and Craig Stadler.
Yep.
And they were 1-up going to the last hole, and it looked like they dominated the match. And Curtis hit it out of play. Craig hit a driver and a 1-iron to 30 feet, a heck of a shot. He was all by himself on the hole. There's a lot of pressure, and he ran it like 18 inches by. He looked at, I believe Langer was one of the players, I can't remember the other partner, and, you know.
Kind of gesturing.
Not a gimme.
Session.
Not a gimme. And they told him if it had been for a half, it would have given it to him. But it was for the match. And Craig missed it. And, you know, it was really, he was really, you know, traumatized by that in the moment. I mean, you could tell he used to have that characteristic thing that he'd do. He'd like scratch his back of his neck. So I'd seen him do it a couple times when he really got hot and really got hurt. And it just deflated the Americans. Now, it was in the morning, but they lost the afternoon sessions. It just flipped the whole thing. And in retrospect, they all said that match turned on that. And the Ryder Cup, in a sense, turned on it because that was a big win for the Europeans for the first time in a long time. And then they went to Muirfield Village in 1987, first time that they had won in America.
Yep.
And that team was stacked, it turns out. We didn't know it at the time.
Yeah.
You know, because nobody heard of Ian Woosnam or Jose Maria Alzabal, and we knew about Sandy Lyle and Langer and Ballesteros, but they weren't famous like they became. And Faldo. Faldo had just won the British Open, but he had been struggling for a couple of years. And that Big Six dominated play. Seve had his best Ryder Cup. That was him at his height. Now, it wasn't necessarily the height of his career, but as a Ryder Cup player, you could argue that was the best golf he ever played.
I would say Jaime really kind of height of career too. I mean, he won one more major after that, but you consider, you know, his play specifically as it pertained to the Masters. He dominated the Masters in the decade of the 80s. He won it twice. He's right there. Obviously, what happened in '86, he's back the next year. He's in the playoff the year that the devastation of that playoff, and yet he's still. I thought he was. Look, he won the Open the next year. I thought he was height of powers at that time.
I think he played his best golf in the early '80s, as far as hitting the ball. But as far as rising to the occasion, that Ryder Cup was the epitome of what he could do, and in terms of energizing an entire team. And you know, the Americans proved to be somewhat fragile coming down the stretch. They always lost the 18 hole almost every time in that match.
Whether it was home or away.
And Jack kind of made a big statement about home or away, but especially at Muirfield Village, he said, well, you know, because of the depth on the American team, these guys don't get into the hunt that often, into contention that often. You know, it's top tens are great, but they don't know how to win. Now it was harsh. But the Europeans were in a position where they were dominating their tour, and all those 6 guys, they were winning a lot of tournaments. So there might have been some validity to it. So the 80s go on, and again, they win in '89 at the Belfry. Now it's like, God, maybe the best players in the world really are all the European or the top Europeans, which had never happened before. Now the Americans are really on their heels, and we gotta get this back. And the American, you know, fans are questioning: are our guys all soft? Are they weak? Geez, what happened here? So that made, to me, the '91 Ryder Cup at Kiawah Island the most pressure-packed of any event I've ever watched.
Sure.
There just was so much riding on it. Even though, again, no money involved, just pride. But the whole image of the PGA Tour and the American players as the world's best was on the line.
And at that point, now Faldo really is established. He's the Iceman now in the game of golf. And even though Seve is still very, very important, and he's a provocateur and all that, Faldo is truly emerged as a force in the venue as well. It wasn't supposed to be the venue, and they make this last-minute pivot. It's supposed to be in California, and all of a sudden they come to this place that looks like, what is this lunar landscape? That added to it, I thought.
Oh, absolutely. You know, and Pete Dye was even
there. And it's ripping, and the closing holes, the 17th hole, was diabolically difficult.
It still is, you know, even when Phil won the PGA there, I remember going to that 17th tee, that long par 4 over the water, and just watching, and the players were backed up there, and the pressure was palpable, and players were watching with more intensity. As usually they don't care that much about what the guy does, but no, it's like, how do you handle this? You know, because it's almost like a rite of passage, especially for some of the guys who were not as well known, maybe like a club pro who was playing. It's like, boy, this guy's really in the cauldron. So anyway, 17, and then we saw everybody remembers what happened to Calc. You know, and that was the most horrifying shot in many ways ever. You know, because the stage was just so fraught with import. And he couldn't handle it, and the Ryder Cup, I think, also took on the place where maybe this is the most pressurized place in professional golf, even more than the majors. So Kiowa elevated the Ryder Cup even more. And that golf course was so penal. And then the way it ended was incredible. I mean, the very last match, Langer has a 6-footer. If he makes it, Europe wins the Ryder Cup. Not a tie, wins the Ryder Cup. If he misses it, U.S. wins.
Yep. Everything
riding on a 6-footer, which at that time was a 50-50 putt. And he misses it. And then to Langer's credit forever, he rebounds from that.
Well, he won the next week in
exactly.
Stuttgart.
Incredible.
Which is one of the great, you talk about rebounding.
And he rebounds with the senior tour to put a total, exclamation point on it. The guy is incredible. And that's what I think was most notable about the European top players, how they really sold out for the Ryder Cup. It meant everything to them. That was the legacy. It started with Seve. All these guys made it so important. Langer was a kind of an emotionless-looking guy,
taciturn,
but he felt it inside.
Absolutely.
I mean, he was carrying the load, and he did it as captain as well.
And Faldo too, who warded himself off every week, every moment, every event, except there.
Yeah.
And you and I talked about this. Look, I think as much as Seve's silhouette is 84 at the Old Course, kind of maybe his crowning achievement, from a Ryder Cup standpoint, it's him in 95 at Oak Hill, literally tears rolling down his cheeks.
The line
Same
in winter.
for Faldo.
Yeah.
And they have their cheeks in each other's hands.
I was right there.
That's the ultimate sacrifice to the other person.
To the other person who were
for the good of the team.
Intense rivals,
Yes.
And Faldo recounts that moment, and Seve took him and he goes, "You are a great player," and the Faldo was like the ultimate validation. He'd already had a great career, but it meant more to him almost than anything else from another player, because Seve was the guy who basically invented the Ryder Cup in its modern form.
Yes.
And 93, of course, we know that the Americans reestablished and won at the Belfry last time they went away. But 95, that was a crusher.
Crusher.
Man, a crusher. I mean,
for Lanny, who and all the way down to one of his captain's picks, the steely Curtis Strange, not to mention Jay Haas, who pops up his tee shot on 18, playing Philip Walton.
Yes.
I mean, and again, you get back to the 18th hole, and all of a sudden it's the Americans who have now established this reputation. Like, why can't you guys win that last hole? Mm-hmm. Whether it's the Belfry or whether it's,
And I think because, I always felt this, even in the 80s, palpably, the Americans always had more pressure because they had everything to lose and not very much to gain.
Agreed.
And they were going to get hammered if they lost, which they did. And I think the Ryder Cup became a burden to a lot of them. I mean, everybody wanted to get on that team, but really, is this fun? Especially if you lose. I don't need this. It's hurting my confidence. I'm not making any money. These Europeans are dancing in our face.
But back then, there wasn't a lot of money to look around at that is being made but I get your point.
Yeah.
I get your point. And now you look around and you go, okay, this is a spectacle.
Yes.
There's a lot of money being made. And that's also an undercurrent that
that's
exists.
a Faustian bargain. If you take that money, I think personally that it's one of the reasons, and we talked about this, the Ryder Cup has its particular stature is because it's for no money. It's for pride. And other athletes from other sports talk about this as like, man, that's the ultimate right there. That's for the love of the game.
That's the essence of
That's competition. That's pure competition. And guys like,
Jim Brown, of all people.
Jim Brown,
I'll never forget, I love this show. Roy Firestone did a daily show on ESPN. It was called Up Close. He got everybody.
Watch it all the time.
And here they are having what he did, which was this wonderful, just rollicking conversation. And for whatever reason, he asked him a question about other sports. And he said, my favorite sporting event is the Ryder Cup. And I fell out of my chair. Jim Brown didn't play golf.
Right.
But his explanation was that was what competition is.
Yeah.
It's sacrificing for the guy next to you, and there was no material gain other than the collective achievement of doing it together.
Yes.
And he said that competition embodied it more than anything else that he saw or watched.
I think
Jim Brown.
I don't know how many people saw that, but that way of thinking about the Ryder Cup is what elevated it to something very special.
Yeah.
And you don't want to mess around too much with that formula. So anyway, I just thought the 90s were the greatest decade of the Ryder Cup. The 80s established it. The 90s created this aura of the best competition and made it, match plays, gosh, sometimes they're blowouts and it's unreliable, but the Ryder Cup was, for that decade, was reliable. It's going to be close every time, and Sunday's going to be incredible, and you're never going to see guys as uncomfortable or having to deal with fear and pressure as much as you will in the Ryder Cup.
And the other thing that we saw on display is it became a live television production where it wasn't all the way up in through the 80s. It's on a tape delay. If you want to watch it, okay. Now, you couldn't find out what happened because there was no internet, but nonetheless, it was plausibly live.
Yeah.
Here are these golfers who have no reputation of being confrontational at all. All of a sudden, you're seeing real friction.
Yes.
And Seve being at the center of it. And obviously what happened at Kiowa with Chip Beck and Paul Azinger. And you're going, look at these guys. These guys wearing pastels and cashmere sweaters are bowing up.
Yeah.
Now, I'd love to see them get in a fight because it'd probably be comical. but that was also an element that was new to an audience that was now taking this in a live way. And the other thing about the 90s, Jaime, is that you had Seve and Faldo, who were very different, that were, they were central to it rising. And as they're exiting stage left, who's entering stage right on the American side, 1995, is Phil's first Ryder Cup. And he's telegenic, and he's flamboyant.
And he could have been the hero of that Ryder Cup.
Absolutely.
If Curtis makes a par.
He's got Peter Ulrich Johansson, his college teammate. He's got him down, he's got him beat.
Yeah.
And he could have been, it's like, oh my God, this guy's he is the Pied Piper.
The fact they put him in the last group said a lot about it right then.
It did.
Yeah.
And then 2 years later, he is taken golf and grabbed it by the scruff of his neck and is driving it into all spaces, not only in sports but in culture, is Tiger.
Yeah.
And his baptism is in Spain in '97. And here's Seve riding on a cart, and he's on every hole simultaneously. Phil and Tiger enter as Seve and Faldo are exiting.
Yeah. But yes, go ahead.
They can't do what the other two did, which was sacrifice.
Who knows? Yeah.
We know.
No, we know. And how, again, it's intangible. We don't know how much difference it makes, but the results kind of back up.
We know.
Yeah.
Team is, it's not as simple as they made more putts. It's not. It's just not. I've listened to too many people who are in the business of building teams. And I'll give you an example of this. And it also has to do with format. When the United States decided that they were going to try to look at this in a different way, they appealed to somebody who had also done it, and that was Mike Krzyzewski and Jerry Colangelo. When the United States basketball team, which similarly had nothing to lose when they played international competitions,
nothing to gain.
when there was not much competition, but in 1992 the Dream Team lit the match on the inspiration for all these other nations investing at a grassroots level to the game of basketball. International basketball is not the NBA. It's different. And so Jerry Colangelo and Mike Krzyzewski, first of all, had to examine the way the game was being played, and also team building. And then it can't not just be about who are the best players.
No,
who makes
do they fit
sense,
together? Yeah.
Who makes sense from a chemistry standpoint. And I think that the Ryder Cup on the American side is not, I think that there are analogous elements to what Mike Krzyzewski did starting in Beijing. And it wasn't just, hey, every 4 years. It was international competitions. It was the idea of that we're going to build a system to when we do get to that once every 4 years, we're built properly. And look, you got to have people like Kobe Bryant, who in Beijing was part of that, and Krzyzewski could have coached him in college, but
and he almost went to the Lakers because of Kobe.
Yes, and he had that guy who was willing to set the tone, and I don't think that Tiger or Phil was willing to set the tone, which also included making themselves kind of available to each other.
And not to defend them, but I mean, golf is a singular game.
Of course it is.
There's no opponent really. There's just the golf course. And I think Tiger always felt like, hey, I'm going to let my clubs do the talking, and I'm going to golf my ball. And I don't necessarily want to be real close to these guys because I got to beat them every year.
Fair.
All week.
Fair.
But that had a cost. I think there's no question about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as they get through the 90s and now we're into 2000s, and the thing that was also happening is that big six that you're referring to, they were becoming major champions, and they were also now dipping their toe in the water of the PGA Tour. Seve tried it, didn't work, but you were starting to see the best players now make their way on a more regular basis to having this duality of supporting the European Tour, but also knowing that the money was greater because of what Tiger created, and really the acceleration of purses after the turn of the century when all of the media deals were up. You're going, they're playing for what? $6, $7, $8, $9 million purses? And so you're starting to see guys like Lee Westwood, and then all these other guys who were becoming the best players, not only on the European Tour, but among the best players in the world, starting to play more. So there was a familiarity that was becoming prevalent when the Ryder Cup was played, where you go, I have no idea who half these guys are. We see them every 2 years. Now you're starting to become familiar with who these guys are.
And it might have changed the chemistry. A lot of these guys came to live in America.
Yes.
But
it didn't.
That's what I'm saying. The Ryder Cup had that lasting legacy of this is where, we play for old world pride, and we're still a little, not necessarily resentful, but we're still feeling like the Americans.
We still have a chip, and we can play it.
They're lording over us, and we can beat them. This is our place to show we belong.
They have BMW courtesy cars.
Yeah.
We have rickshaws at Czech Masters.
But that's at the European Tour. But I mean, even the guys who are playing, even the Europeans who are playing the PGA Tour.
Yes.
That feeling is still retained.
Here's the thing about it, and I know that this is kind of, but you have talked a lot to Paul McGinley. And I think Paul has been one of the great stewards of the European Ryder Cup system.
No question.
Not only in terms of what he did as a captain, taking on an iconic figure who was brought out of mothballs in 2014 in Tom Watson, the infrastructure of their brain trust and the way that they go about things. They have never forgotten where they came from, which I think is very, very important. But they also, I think, have something else that is tangible, not intangible. They realize that in the absence of the Ryder Cup, I don't know what the European Tour is.
There's still urgency.
There's urgency to the importance of it from a monetary standpoint.
Yeah.
They know that in the absence of it, look, when it's a non-Ryder Cup year, the Tour loses money. When it's a road Ryder Cup year, they break even. They make money when they get to have it at home once every 4 years. That's not lost on those guys.
You're right.
Not at all.
Huge consequences for the Ryder Cup still. And Paul he's just a brilliant man.
He really is.
And he's got a wonderful human aspect to him.
He's a team athlete as well. His background is in team competition.
Oh, he's a tough, gritty guy who played those, what's it, it's hurling? I forget.
Yeah, hurling.
Yeah.
And we're in
that's why he ended up playing golf, because he got his knee crushed.
Well, if you watch that sport, you talk about
There's no pads. It's nothing but elbows and
barbaric as it gets.
Exactly.
And you represent something intensely personal, which is your county for life.
Yeah.
And so he has that. And they've also studied the great cultural team systems globally in sports, whether it's the All Blacks and that rugby team, and the great book that was written called Legacy.
Is there anything more intimate than a scrum?
No. And so here they have what I think are these built-in institutional, foundational principles that I think don't go away. And they also get buy-in from, whether it's of the present makeup, the Justin Roses and the Rory McIlroys and guys who now are kind of on the fringes because they're on LIV, and Lee Westwood and Graham McDowell and guys like that, that there is this real palpable sense of privilege to wear the colors.
Yeah.
And you counter that with the American team that undeniably they want to win and they try but I think there's always been an undercurrent of obligation.
As you were saying, privilege and obligation.
Privilege and obligation are different things.
Yeah.
They're different.
Wow. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
These are all things that we all feel. hard to prove. And I know the Americans now, the shoe's on the other foot. They want something to prove. They want, no, we love this. We want it as bad as they do. We can do it. But I think the cultures are, it's more organic for Europe. And it's more, kind of constructed. Like the task force. We got to do something. And honestly, they were kind of trying to emulate Europe.
Totally.
And it's a hard thing to emulate when you have a completely different geography and infrastructure and basically so much money on the PGA Tour that the urgency isn't quite the same in terms of we got to do this for our tour. Our tour is going to be fine whether we win a Ryder Cup or not.
Why are we always so damn clumsy, though, with branding as well? Why can't you just call it the Ryder Cup Committee? Why do you have to turn the task force? That alone it can be lampooned, and it was from the outset.
Well, I just thought it was what do you call it? The fruit of the poisonous tree or whatever. It wasn't founded in the right way.
No.
It was Phil humiliating or trying to humiliate Tom Watson. It just didn't feel right. And some people said in retrospect, revisionist history, in my opinion, Phil was taking a bullet to be the bad guy to help the team get better. No, I thought Phil had an issue with Tom Watson and he was getting even, and then he did a very good job of it. And, it had real repercussions. Then they won in 2016, so it seemed like it validated the task force, but they got blown out in France. I don't know that the task force has made really that much difference.
No, I think it's a worthwhile pursuit to get what was part of the task force, which was more player investment, more voice.
Yeah.
Because the Europeans
you don't have to put a name on it and a system on it.
Right.
And I'm not against what they did in terms of the effort. But I think too much was made of, we've revamped everything. No, it's still the same guys, and it's still the same match. And those sentiments that you're trying to instill, those could have been instilled informally, just because that's what it takes to win, basically. Yeah.
I think the other thing from a historical standpoint, and this is part of why I think some people struggle understanding why the Americans lose as often as they do. Now, should it be a little bit more balanced? Yeah, I think that's fair that the Americans have underperformed, and the fact that they haven't won on the road at all, that's dubious to go what will now be 3.5 decades when they have their next opportunity. Meanwhile, the Europeans have won in the 80s, in the 90s, in the 2000s, and in the 2010s on American soil. They're better at this. And so why is it that we keep showing up here and too many people who have big voice in the game keep leaning on world rankings as some barometer as to who's better?
Yeah.
It's not that simplistic.
Well, first of all, I don't think it's a determination of who's better,
Some people have leaned on it as if it is.
Well, that week doesn't come down to, it doesn't determine who's better players. Now, as it turned out, history proved that Big Six, they were better players.
Sure.
Okay, but not necessarily does it mean, Europe won, that means they're better. It's still only 12 guys. It's still only 3 days.
Correct. And there's so many, the vagaries of the format are discomforting.
Yeah.
They're unusual for both sides. But one side has been decidedly better.
The pattern is certainly, I think they're better at the team play and the unity that it takes to play well for 3 days together. They're better at that. Are they better players? I would say no. I say the Americans are still better players.
But they're better players when they play 72 holes in
and that's the test of who the best player is, in my opinion.
Yeah, it is.
So they're better players.
But they're the better team.
They're the better team.
So that's why everyone keeps showing up and talking about, the United States has the #1 player in the world, and 2 years ago, they would have 6 of the top 15. We're not putting 72 holes of an aggregate total together. They're putting a partner out there, and they're playing each other's ball. And so, they are the better players.
I think that's
Europe is the better team. And by the way, that team showing up there next week, they're the better team. It doesn't mean they're going to win. I'm talking about Europe. I think they're a better team, don't you?
I think actually they're better on paper, not just as a team. Actually, in this case, they might.
I think in this case, if you took those 12 guys.
The way they're playing right now, this year, that's all. Not necessarily world ranking. World rankings are legit, but they don't necessarily do the short term.
Maybe not as legit as they were a couple years ago before Liv and those guys, some of whom are still Bryson, Tyrrell Hatton, John Rahm. They're among the best players in the world.
I think one of the things that has been a pressure additive for Americans is the resentment that we're being judged as, not as good as the Europeans if they beat it. That's a lot to lose, that sense of perception that, oh, those guys beat you, they're better than you. Like you said, the distinction is they're a better team.
They're a better team.
But they're not better players.
I agree with that.
As a group, that's all.
Yeah.
And I think that bothered the tour and put them in a defensive position and added pressures like, man, we better win or we're not going to be considered the best players anymore.
So one last thing as it relates to the Phil and Tiger dynamic, because trying to explain it, look, it's not easy to explain, but I also think it's hard to explain how those two guys, the two best players of the last 30 years, without question, were on 8 teams together. They won once.
Yeah, amazing.
And it was in 1999, and it was a Hail Mary out of nowhere on a hair on fire
99.
Sunday at Brookline.
Yeah.
They won one time on 8 teams together. Explain that to me.
This is going to sound ridiculous, but it's still a small sample size. It's still a small sample size, and there's so many variables because there are only 2 guys among 12. So I think the pressure and everything affected their teammates as well.
It's a small sample size over 21 years.
I get it,
From 1997 to 2018, they were
What I will say I think is true is that Tiger never prioritized the Ryder Cup.
That's part of it.
Of course it is. I would support.
Yeah.
I think that supports the reason, the thesis that you're putting forth. That's correct as far as, they underperformed for some reason. And I think the reason was he just didn't care as much as the other great players on the European team.
Are you surprised that he now does? Is it because he is not in a position to look at those guys as the prey, and now his mind can be pragmatic and he can pivot to the investment of time and sharing, and it's cool. I like it. I love the fact.
I think
that
he's in that
now
stage
invested.
of life, and it happened as his career started to wane, that he developed friendships. People, who respected him showed that they supported him through these tough times, and I think he really appreciated it. And he's formed relationships, and now those relationships are best celebrated and most fulfilling when he plays golf with these guys.
Yeah.
I mean, when he was captain for the President's Cup, I think he loved that week.
I agree.
It was one of the best
And
weeks.
he played
beautifully. It was the best of all worlds. Yeah, it was cool. And so I think he saw the value in that. But while he was trying to throttle everybody, it wasn't in his interest, to be friends.
And the guy who wanted to throttle more than anybody else
Was Phil.
Yeah. And so I just think.
Yeah, you wonder subliminally is he's like going,
just created
what? That famous picture at
Oakland Hills.
Oakland Hills when the ball goes out.
The quizzical look
When it goes
Phil
out of
launched
bounds,
it over the fence.
it was a Mona Lisa, look. It was perfect. Sure.
Last thing on him, he will captain the team in Ireland, correct?
Makes sense, sure. And I think Bethpage, the timing
Personal
of it.
relationships with the owners.
I think he really wants to play next year. I really do. And I think he's trying to get ready, and there's a lot going on.
But realistically,
he didn't need the hassle in New York, probably.
Fair enough.
But Ireland's a friendly place for him. J.P.
elements.
McManus, all those guys,
Yes.
they love him over there.
Used to go there back in the day.
Right, with O'Meara
Gallivant,
and everybody.
Boondoggle, and Barnstorm before the Open Championship. Boy, those were the
fits.
days.
And he'll be older, and maybe the playing bug will be somewhat sated, and he can focus on that thing.
I will tell you this, and I'll write it down in ink. Keegan Bradley will be on his team.
Oh, beautiful.
If Keegan Bradley is anywhere near the periphery of whether it's top 20, top 25, and I don't care if it's charity, I'll tell you right now,
Because he stepped in.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Keegan's going to be on Tiger's team.
He did save what would have been a really awkward situation.
Absolutely.
Yeah, he did.
And you can say, well, that's not the way to do it. Hey, man, too bad.
Yeah.
I mean, I just think he will be, and I still think at 41 years of age, he's going to be a good player.
Sure.
And let him have And here
Let
he
him
is.
have his-
His name is Keegan Bradley.
Let him have his
and
Ryder Cup.
Let him have his curtain-pulling moment in Ireland.
Nobody loved the Ryder Cup more. I think
Even though he only played on 2 teams.
there was something palpable about
Agreed.
him. It's just like
Azinger wasn't on a lot of teams.
Azinger was that way. He can be a real catalyst
Yeah.
emotionally, inspirationally. That guy has value. you
Okay,
know.
so let's talk about what's on the line this week. For the United States team, if they lose this, are we looking at total reconstruction? Are we going to look at all of a sudden another cause celeb and we have to completely rebuild the model? Knowing who we know is going to be the captain in 27?
I'm going to project a possible theme if they lose, which will be decadence. You know, live, money, taking your eye off the ball, you know, playing for the wrong reasons,
Interesting.
forgetting the soul of the game.
Okay.
Now, I'm not saying it's accurate, but I think it'll be raised.
Okay. This is also what's fun, but really, you know, it's dicey. Again, can one person have such an effect on a team when they can only contribute what they can, and that is potentially to play 5 sessions. Few do. Scottie Scheffler as a central figure, I think he is in a stealthy way demonstrative, and I think that, look, he wept after getting obliterated in Rome in a match where he was paired with Brooks Koepka.
Yeah, he was embarrassed. Yeah.
What do you think? Do we get him in a way that you're like, holy crap? Not only is he the best player, like, can a guy carry a Ryder Cup team? Can
Well,
one
I think
guy
Seve
carry a
kind of
Ryder-
did.
Yeah.
I think Seve
You
did.
think Scheffler can?
Well, he's got a totally different personality,
Yes.
and
Just by being that much better than
and the
everybody
outward
else.
motive is not as clear. But I do think he feels like, man, if I just put it out there as hard as I can all the time, which he does, and we saw that in Napa, why not? I don't think he's out to make history as the guy who played 5 and carried the team.
No, I'm
I
with
just
you.
think it's an extension of who he is at this moment in time. He's the best player. When he doesn't play that great, he's still the best player.
Yes.
You know, he's always in contention. He's top 5 even when he putts bad. It's amazing. So you want him. He's one of those guys, you know, who plays 48 minutes, you know, in the 7th game.
Yes.
You want him in there even if he's not at his best because he's
Yeah.
that good. But I also think he knows that guys are looking up to him now.
Yeah.
I mean, even Rory defers and says, man, I got to be more like Scottie, the way he plays. You know, he's the model. And I think he takes great pride in that. And he is tiger-like in that regard. And I think he also has that just natural compassion for other people. And he's going, I want to lift my guys. I want to lift my guys. So, you know, it may not make sense to play 5, but if anybody's capable and if he's playing decent especially, yeah, go with him every time.
Let me give you an analogy because, and I don't think that he is in this guy that I'm going to mention didn't just have this stretch. He had a great career. I think you and I are of the same belief that separation is an incredibly compelling thing. And he separated himself. And if he shows up in this environment and just simply by being the best player and shows, again, like he always does, that he's the best player, and they win, and let's say he goes, you know, 3-1-1, or let's say he goes 4-0-1, it's like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Here's who he kind of reminds me of. And you know, you grew up in the Bay Area, but you get this. Earl Hershiser. Earl Hershiser went on the mound, and it was inevitable that he was going to mow you down, mow you down, to the point that he went more than 50 innings without giving up a run. And I said this about Scheffler after he won the Open Championship. If you ever get to a light and the gate comes down for a train, and you're going, how long is this freight train going to take? That's kind of what Scheffler feels like to me. The gate has come down,
And it's like-
and how long are we going to be sitting here watching these boxcars go by that are in the form of wins? And at some point you go, I'm kind of now entertained by this. Like, how long is this going to last?
Well-
I'd kind of like to get to the office, but I want to get to the office and tell people that I
saw
sat at
this.
that damn thing for 14 minutes. That's kind of what he is right now. And that, to me, is effing compelling.
Well, dominance is the best thing in
It is
for me.
the
Dominance,
best thing.
best thing in sports. who do we talk about? We talk about Jordan. We talk about Brady. You know,
Talk about Tiger.
talk about Jim Brown. You know, all of. I mean,
Talk about Mahomes.
Yes.
Like this guy's inevitable. Like somehow, some
I just
way.
think it's in our brain wiring. Is like, what are the limits of human abilities? Who can do it at this level? And then what does that take? What is the art of that? What is the qualities that you need to get that high? It's fascinating, you know, and it never gets boring. I don't care if Tiger was. Everybody was saying, "Oh, there's no suspense."
No.
It's like watch it.
Every week was suspenseful.
To do something well, you know, it's a special feeling, and to do something.
All you got to do is ask his peers, who like J.J. Spawn said it. You mentioned it last night, and I'll never forget Trevor Immelman when he won the Masters. And he literally kept taking week off after week off, and he finally reemerged. And the first thing he said at his first press conference after winning a major was, "I don't know how Tiger does this."
Exactly. Yeah. Well, Tiger's special, but you know, the guys who endure, they weren't always the winners either. It's because they did something so wonderfully well. Ted Williams.
Yeah.
You know, you think of him, and he's got a mystique, an aura. I mean, Hogan has a mystique, an aura. He didn't win every time. He was one of the greatest players, obviously. I mean, but golf's different because, you know, Jordan, he won so often. And it's one-on-one, and you can see the difference so starkly against the guy that you're measured against right there, even in tennis.
Yeah.
Golf's a little more, you know, ephemeral that way. I mean, you're just playing yourself, and the margins are so small sometimes, and the bounce of the ball. But there's something that happens on Sundays where you can tell the difference. And Jack had it, and Tiger had it, and some guys have it for a short time and it goes away. And the guys who hang on to it like that, they're just special, and I think that's what we love to see, and Scottie's kind of getting into that territory.
So let me get some thoughts on Rory from you, because now he's the elder statesman. He's the one who's played on the most teams on the European side. This is his 8th team. Justin Rose, 7. They've got a lot of guys, but with 4 or more. And meanwhile, the United States, they only have 1 player that is playing in his 4th Ryder Cup, and that's Justin Thomas. And that's okay, because actually the Europeans, a lot of this experience is winning experience. For the Americans, for all those years, all the guys like, oh, look at Jim Furyk, he's on his 7th team. Yeah, they've lost 6 times. And I love Jim.
There's collective memory.
There is. And Davis Love and Justin Leonard and all. It's like, yeah, okay, great. They know what it's like to lose. When you look at Rory, look, he was good with Fleetwood in 2023. My expectation is, why wouldn't they be right out there on Friday morning? I played with Fitzpatrick twice.
I can't think of a bad partner for Rory for some
Really?
reason.
Well, it's interesting.
I mean, maybe somebody who sprays the ball.
A lot of Poulter matches for Rory. Started in 2012 after he was tethered to McDowell in 2010, and in the beginning, he played both sessions with Graham on Friday at Medina, and then they broke him apart, and he was that Saturday.
But who was the alpha? It's Poulter.
It was Poulter.
Yeah, and you know, I think that's a measure of where Rory has gotten to, and where he was when Poulter made those 5 putts at Medina. The camera would go to Rory, and it reminded me of when Tiger hit that incredible chip in Japan when he was playing with Duval
at the World Cup.
And Duval, you know, I mean,
one of the great shots ever.
Duval probably had more game than anybody else who played against Tiger, and Tiger would acknowledge that. Duval was a great player. But there was just something that guy had just done that was, I can't really fathom doing that.
He saw a witch, is what he saw.
Well, but I think Rory had that same look with Poulter. Can I do that? I don't know.
There was a wide-eyed, holy crap, I don't know what it's like to be in that space.
I can win by 8, but I can't do that. You know? But now, I'm not saying he can do that, but he's grown, and he has some of that grit, and he has some of that ability maybe to transcend in the moment, as he did at the Masters and win that Grand Slam. And he's done some magical things. And not to say he's going to be like Poulter, but only to say he's different now, and he can be a leader as a result, because I think people realize he's been through the mill, man.
He was great in Rome.
Yeah, he really was.
Great.
Quietly, and I love when he's great, because he's modestly great. Yeah. You know, you don't feel like...
But I thought he was ruthless Rory, which we don't get a lot of... There's not a lot of episodes of him kind of get nasty. And I've talked to McGinley about this, and it makes him smile.
No, and Paul likes it when he gets nasty.
Yeah.
He likes it. What does he call it? Sharp elbows. I like.
Yeah, elbows out.
Elbows out.
Yeah.
He's got all those.
He's got all these great phraseologies.
The back foot, et cetera. Yeah.
Yes, back foot, front foot.
Yeah.
Frank Nobile also, he likes the
Well, it comes from those sports they played with no padding. It's all elbows and knees, and you're skinned up, and you're killing yourself.
They've been in some back alley fights before.
Yeah.
Rahm's particularly interesting to me because the live thing is not as discomforting. It's not as acrimonious. They realize how important he is to that side, and he also had a year where he put his nose in the middle of it a couple of times.
Yeah.
In particular at the PGA, and I don't care how he finished. He knew after he didn't take advantage of the 14th hole and the 15th hole at Quail Hollow, and he knew that Scheffler was going to, he went for it. He went for it on 16, he went for it on 17, whatever. He got himself in the mix again. How about him? What does your intuition tell you about him? Because him and Tyrrell Hatton in Rome, they were very good together. And now they're teammates on Live.
They seem
to
assume
they're
Yeah, no, they're soulmates because they understand how emotion can get away from you sometimes. It doesn't mean that you've lost it. If you can still manage it.
Yeah.
And I think that John often felt very sensitive about getting criticized for blowing up on the golf course. And rightfully so. It's not a great look, but it didn't mean that he couldn't play. That he had given away his ability to perform. It was something he needed to do. That's his personal way. I'm sure he's monitored it to some extent. Tiger had some of that too. He was great at being ready on the next shot, and I think John's probably gotten better at that too. I think his level of play is probably ever as high as ever as far as the shots he can hit. But can he compete to the same level with the confidence and the sense of emotional control that he needs because of what's happened with Liv? That he's been criticized so much that he may have some. It's a loaded thing to say, but he may have some regrets that he did give away a couple of years of his career.
Sure.
And so maybe psychologically he's just not primed in the same way because he hasn't finished as well. Even in the live events, for the longest time he wasn't winning them. He's a
top 10 machine.
But I mean, he's a dominator, man. He should be blowing those guys away.
Dominated with winning.
Yeah.
John wins this weird season-long thing with just really good production.
So
that's
I think
not what he's known to be.
This is just totally from the outside. Have no idea, and he'll probably get mad at. But I don't think he's quite the same mentally.
Okay.
And that doesn't mean that he won't rise up in the Ryder Cup. It's a great place for him to kind of prove himself again. He might have extra motivation and might play and might be the star of the whole show. But I still think he's a question mark in terms of will he produce peak play commensurate to who he is in the game of golf. A former #1 with majors who can dominate, and a power player who's really impressive when he's rolling. But we haven't seen enough of that to feel like it's still the same.
So before we finish, Keegan got the lion's share of the attention this year as it pertains to the two captains. Naturally, because it was reasonable he was going to try to do something that hadn't been done since 1963, and it was very different back then. And we know that if the United States win, Keegan goes into a space that's really special in United States Ryder Cup lore.
Yes.
He's Captain Keegan. He's the kid from St. John's that used to go play as many holes as he could because he couldn't play the other holes on the other side of the road.
That's an amazing story.
It's great.
Yeah.
It's great. Luke Donald also finds himself in a space that was accidental because of the emergence of Liv and the displacement of punting Henrik Stenson. And here he comes, and he masterfully strikes all the right chords in Rome and makes the choice to bring the band back together, and it is the band. Even Rasmus Højgaard,
the same
if his
assistants.
brother sat in and played the bass, you wouldn't know unless he wasn't as good at the chords. It's 11 of the 12 guys.
Yeah.
If they win, what does it mean for the accidental captain?
Intelligence and competence. The guy, it reminds me of how he played. Now, he wasn't the straightest driver and not,
short and crooked,
not
is not
particularly
the way to go
long.
through life.
Of course. But everything else, masterful, and he got the most out of it, and he did it with, great physical talent, but also you sensed mentally, this guy is really, he's primed to perform, especially as he got closer to the hole. And I just thought, God, it's an underrated thing for him to get to #1 in the world.
I totally agree. A little anecdote. In 2012, Webb Simpson had played well in the second to last event. This is before the schedule all changed, and the last event used to be Disney. And here comes Luke Donald, and he has only one choice in order to be the money winner, which was a big, big deal back then, and then also the presumptive player of the year. And he shot 65 on Sunday playing with Webb Simpson. And I did an event with Webb at the end of that year, and he said, "That little son of a bitch." Yeah. God, what a competitive son of a gun he is.
He's a tough guy.
He's a tough guy.
He's a tough guy. And, you get the feeling that I see a lot of Langer in him. Langer was a good captain. And it's just from respect, for this.
Road captain.
Road captain, unremarkable. Now, Luke has wonderful gift of vocabulary and rhetorical skills, and it was beautiful at that opening ceremony. I mean, I thought that was a psychological advantage.
He went to an elite primary school. Like, if you look at Luke Donald's background, and I've talked to him about this.
And Northwestern.
He kind of, and he kind of, he does this kind of shucks kind of thing.
Yeah.
You can't be adult to go to the schools and to get the kind of formative education that he got. It required real rigor, and he's got it.
And I just think his decision making is sound.
Yeah.
No mistakes.
Yeah.
You golf. I mean, you're going to lose your pairings that you thought were perfect. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I just thought in the grand scheme, the players were confident that he was making the right decisions. McGinley, who I think set the precedent for that as well as Langer. I think Luke's
tooled around this team last week. These guys are not just showing up this week. They're getting together. They've been together.
This is a brain trust.
It's a brain trust, and it's a unit that has. They're not only acclimated to the time, they're acclimated to the space. They played Bethpage a week before Ryder Cup week started.
Part of me is like, it's still golf and it's still unpredictable, But you make such a great case that, there are factors here that you can't ignore.
There are.
And there's pieces that have been put in place and they matter. And when it gets really tight, which it does in the Ryder Cup, maybe that's the difference maker, just that rigor and that sense of, let's just pour ourselves into this thing more so than their team.
Again, this is very nuanced, but I heard Justin Rose say this within the last 2 weeks about the American team. And he actually said, and I'm paraphrasing, but he pretty much used these words, they're trying too hard to act like they have cohesion. It's not about just being good friends.
Right.
And that's not, great friends don't necessarily make great teammates.
No, I've seen that. Sometimes it's harder.
Yes.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing, and again, it's nuance. I think you're a praise on that. I think that they look at that and they go, they're trying.
Yeah.
They're trying.
But they'll never have what we have.
It's kind of like the flow state. As soon as you start thinking about being in it,
you're out of it.
You lose it. You lose it.
Yeah, well, and they're also, I think the Americans, and it's been a really sincere and productive effort at the task force, you have to say. But it's, it's something that is picked up and then, in a limited framework of time that, you're not living it. Those kinds of guys, they just kind of live it, and that's a great advantage. They don't have to force it. It was there from the beginning of the roots of the Ryder Cup, as far as starting in the '80s, and it's just been carried on. And now they take pride in it, and it's like it's in us. And they still have to. I've heard John Huggins, great friend, and knows the European. They have a lot of disputes in the team room, and they're not all friends.
No.
But something happens where, okay, it's time to perform. We put it aside. And this is for the greater good. This is for us selfishly, but this is going to make so many people happy.
Exactly. Yeah, that's the whole point. Is that being great friends is great, but it's the willingness and the ability to have differing points of view, but to find consensus and move on and that's what they do. And I know that this is completely frivolous, but look, Tyrrell Hatton showing up at Bethpage last week and displaying some flatulence, playing a practice round, all those guys cackling. There's a self-deprecating kind of, we are making ourselves vulnerable. That is the other essence of great teams.
It is part of the culture of
Europe.
Yes, I agree. And European Tour has a culture. They're commercials.
They're brilliant.
They're brilliant. They're funnier. They just have a way of being natural and human.
They let it be.
Yeah, it's that's a cultural thing.
It is.
America is full of strivers and achievers, and sometimes you lose, you know.
And a lot of vanity.
Sure, but it's a lot of great things that come out of it, but sometimes you miss the relationships as a result. You know, and Europe seems to value the relationships just culturally, it seems like.
Okay, so
you see people holding hands, you know, in the park, girlfriend holding hands. You know, it's just a different, closer relationship in many of the countries.
Yeah. As far as what's going to happen, we will let it unfold. What do you think's going to happen?
I think the Americans will win.
They do.
I do, and I think it'll be close.
Yeah.
But I have no idea. I
Sure.
mean, you know, I'm the worst at.
And this again, that's the thing about. Back to your point about who are the better players. This is not a referendum on that. What it is, it's a wonderful display of why this format can be so damn interesting. Is that you think you may have an advantage, and as much as I know players say, always expect them to make it, you're human beings. When you have a decided advantage and a guy stands on his head and holds a bunker shot from an impossible lie, you didn't think he did, even though you may finish the match and say, yeah, I expected him to. Bullshit, no you didn't. And confrontation, which some are comfortable with it, some are not. Ben Crenshaw hated it. That's why his singles record was abysmal.
And his playoff
including
record.
losing to Eamon Darcy in
I was there.
1987 at Muirfield Village.
That was a painful one.
That's why, like Patrick Cantlay, he's good in this. Like he's kind of peculiar.
Yeah, and Patrick Reed.
I lean Europe. I lean Europe because they're better at this. But they would do something that hadn't been done in a while. They would, one, make it competitive on the road, which it hadn't been in a decade. You do think that, right? This will be a far more competitive Ryder Cup than the last 5 we've had. The last 5 have been blowouts.
Yes, it should be, and I think that's just the law of averages. These shouldn't be blowouts. At the same time, I think this is the hardest arena for a visiting team to go into, arguably, in the history of the Ryder Cup.
Yeah. But even if you take out 2010 and 2012, which are very close, and Europe obviously won in 12 on the road, the United States almost did it in a really weird Ryder Cup where they had to kind of merge sessions because of the weather at Celtic Manor. 2008 was a blowout at Valhalla. 2006 was a blowout in Ireland. 2004, the Europeans blew out the Americans at Oakland Hills, and 2002 was a blowout.
Well, I think the Europeans have a really strong team.
Yeah.
So I think that's why it'll be close.
Okay.
I don't think it'll be a blowout. And I think, there's a lot, and the Americans don't have the strongest team that they've had. Every year they say they're the finest players, ladies and gentlemen, in the world. All that. But I don't think Keegan's going to say that. He ain't going to go home.
I'd love it if he did.
It'd be great.
Just go ahead and light the match.
But no, if I was just picking, matches based on these players and how they're playing right now, I think Europe actually has a better team, better players.
Yeah.
Playing better, but I throw it all out when the matches start.
Sure.
I don't think there's no weak players on this American team. There's just unproven ones. More so than there are on the European.
Yeah, that's why it's neat because as a team you got to be opportunistic. One guy could carry a team. He could have a 1-3-1 record, but he could have been outstanding.
Yeah.
It's just that's why all of it is so damn compelling. Thank you for doing this.
Thanks.
And most importantly, thank all of you for listening and watching this 5 Clubs Ryder Cup historical perspective and preview of the 2025 Ryder Cup at Bethpage. Enjoy all of it. Pace yourself. These are 3 very long days. Thanks.